I mean, in your lifetimes, in your public work, you've each had an interesting relationship with the notion of political correctness, and I'm curious how you relate to this concept these days. Like, Steve, what do you think of that?
Well, I have to admit that it's been an evolution for me. Like, the term political correctness came about when the left, the sort of radical left, recognized that there was developing this very stilted speech where people were using gender-neutral pronouns or using he, she for everything. People were trying to be inclusive about every statement, trying not to assume any sort of roles or stereotypes. And it really stifled conversation. It made it really difficult to have regular conversations. And as a point of critique within the left, whenever anybody would use one of the prohibited pronouns or say something that was judgmental, somebody else would kind of chide them and say, that's not PC. Right. And that was with an air of awareness that those things were trivial and that wasn't, it was kind of a lighthearted point of critique within the left that the left was getting too hidebound in its language, right? And the term political correctness has now been adopted as a weapon by the right and by the conservative elements of culture as a way to henpeck anyone who expects other people to behave decently toward each other, toward the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And so the term political correctness has now become an arguing point for the conservative side of the spectrum, and it was co-opted from the left. If you substitute a friend of mine posted this on Facebook, and it's as stupid as it is for me to have to admit that this actually makes perfect sense. If you substitute the phrase "being decent toward other people" for the term political correctness in every instance, then you start to see how ridiculous the arguments against political correctness as an ideology are.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, when someone is offended by political correctness, what they mean is they don't want their biases and their presumptions to be criticized. They want to be able to get away with them and not have anybody call them on them. And I think it's healthy to be called on those biases and presumptions. And if nothing else, it gives the person who's been called on them an opportunity to justify their biases and their presumptions. And it identifies aspects of normal interaction that have buried within them layers of condescension and bias and criticism and prejudice that would have been unspoken otherwise. And while it might be irritating for somebody to pipe up now and again, I would much rather have that dialogue and risk offending someone who's being callous. I would much rather have that happen than, carry on the way things have been with all this sort of institutional and casual racism and sexism and homophobia and all that. Have all of that stuff just simmering unspoken. I would rather have it pointed out now and again. No, that doesn't mean that it has to be kowtowed to at every point, and what's funny is funny, and the mind wanders where it wanders, and sometimes it wanders into places that are not polite or appropriate for all audiences. But
right.
And I don't think any of that can be denied, but I also don't think that it's a bad idea every now and again to be reminded that it's not evil to wish that people were more civil toward each other. There's nothing inherently wrong with that.